it go
yeah,
time.
for our first Wednesday night tech live thing.
Yeah. Well, and there may be a few bumps, but just let us know. We'll try to get them sorted out.
Yeah, well, this is like an experiment, you know? Everything's an experiment. So, what are we doing tonight?
Tonight is all about flat tap camshaft braking.
That's a good topic.
Yeah.
Because it's like everybody is dealing, like lately, you know, everybody wipes out a cam. I've wiped out a couple this year. 40 years of building engines, never had a camshaft problem this last year. Not this year, the year before was too.
Oh, wow. Well, I've been lucky, but, you know, I'm overly cautious.
Yeah, and you should be. A lot of it has to do with bad metallurgy. The two that I wiped out, we found it on dissecting. We did a video about this. One of them was on a 273 Chrysler, and the cam, you could see where the cam itself had a bad heat treat. The lobes, 4 lobes next to each other went bad.
Oh.
So the front part of the cam was good, the back part of the cam was good. They're right in the second quarter of the cam, 4 lobes in a row. So it was obviously something to do with the camshaft itself, right, and not
geometry. Just that, you know, otherwise it would have been 2 cylinders right next to each other.
Right.
But this is across the motor.
And then one of them was a lifter issue. With a lifter, I had 3 lifters, separate areas of the engine. 3 lifters went bad. And they all came from the same batch. They were sealed power lifters that I picked up at a parts store, which in the past I never had a problem with.
Right.
But what I did notice, we did a video about this, but I did notice when I took those lifters out of the box, you know, lifters are ground with a bit of a crown to them.
Right.
Okay. And what I noticed when I took those lifters out of the box, that you could see machine marks straight across, which is something you're not supposed to see. You're not supposed to see machine marks. But I noticed when I took them out of the box, they had like the ghost of machine marks running across the surface, which means that they weren't ground with the correct crown. And I didn't bother checking because never had a problem. So if you don't have a problem, you don't check.
Right.
But now this has made me cautious to check for everything.
Right.
Because once you wipe out a lifter, once you wipe out a cam, it's like
the whole motor's junk.
It's not going to junk, but you got to take it all apart and start all over again.
Yep. And you're replacing bearings usually because it sucks. That's hard metal. It goes right through the motor gently.
Yep. So now, where's the camera? There's the camera. So I'm used to looking at over there. So Uncle Kathy is home, right? So we've got a different. Hey, come out here, man. Introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody.
Tell them who you are.
Okay, I'm Brandon. I'm just a mechanic, and that's about it.
Well, you're also in on the Lemons.
Yeah, I'm on the Lemons race team.
So what kind of mechanic are you? We've never met before.
Never met. Yeah. So I used to be a Mercedes-Benz mechanic.
Ooh, okay.
So that's kind of where I come in with Lemon stuff, is the Mercedes side.
Okay. What do you do now?
I work for corporate as a warranty auditor.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty sweet.
So he's going to be doing taking Uncle Kathy's place. She's prettier than you are.
I don't doubt it.
Much less facial hair.
Oh, that's a good thing, right?
That's a big plus.
So, well, man your station, and you guys got any questions? Anything you want to ask? Anything? I don't even know how we're going to transition to all of this.
I don't know.
We've never done anything like live in the shop before. Well, no, we did a whole live engine build, but that was different.
Oh, really? Well, this is kind of going to be a learning process, right? So
let's start with, why don't we wait for the first question or statement or something to come through here and give us some direction.
Right now, everyone's just saying that Kathy looks a lot better than I do. So
she does. She does.
No, I don't blame them.
Yeah, it's either Kathy or Crystal. You know, my daughter-in-law, somebody, you know. So he's like the first guy that's actually going to be.
Well, that's right. Every time I have watched the live feed, it's always been Uncle Kathy or Crystal.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little weird for me not having a female around.
Like, go give me one.
It's mostly comments right now. I don't see any questions. Any questions that you'd like Uncle Tony to answer?
Oh, Dallas too.
I mean, we could actually just start off basic and simple. Why?
Show us the engine.
Okay.
Which engine? This is just a random 455 that has nothing to do exactly with the video that we're doing here. But we are gonna break in the cam benefit. He's got it set up on his engine run stand. Can you see that? Can you see this motor from where?
It's in the background.
Okay. How far in the background? Can you see me?
Barely.
Barely. Okay. Can we? Oh, no, this rolls easy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about your run stand.
Okay, well, my run stand is just something that's kind of home built. I originally had a guy from Murfreesboro build up the bottom frame for me, and an old engine stand. If you are a
Got a question.
Historical engine builder kind of guy, you'll know that there is a distinct difference between engine stands from the 70s or 60s or 50s until today's cheap stuff that you go buy at Harbor Freight.
Right. Oh, yeah, you can see this thing's been through a war.
Right, and then you can see it's also, these are all milled out of 1-inch plate.
Oh, yeah, seriously.
And so you definitely don't want to use something cheap to hold the motor because the majority of the weight's still being held by the bell housing. But most of this is just made out of leftover parts. And
I think we need to do a video on the engines, on the run stand itself. Because this is something, because this is something a lot of guys want to build for themselves.
Oh, and it
Real quick.
doesn't cost a lot.
Question.
Dominic Bailey. Is it necessary to remove the inner springs if you have dual valve springs for break-in?
It depends. If it's just a damper, because a lot of dual springs are just the regular spring and then a damper on the inside. If it's just a damper, I wouldn't worry about it.
If you have the other spring internally, it's recommended by your cam builder,
Right.
depending upon who you have. Cams guarantees every time take that inner spring.
Yeah.
Right. Now, other cam manufacturers I've had Crowers before never said anything about it.
And then this is for flat tappet only, because if it's a roller, don't worry about it. You know, whatever spring stack you have there is fine. But really, it goes by the spring. Like for instance, I just assembled the Slant 6 that's going in that dart, and I used 340 springs on that. And the 340 spring it's not a heavy spring. Like off the top of my head, I don't know what the seat pressure is on it, but it's got a damper. So it's like not anything to worry about. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It looks like it's a heavy spring, but it's not. Right. So you really got to go by the type of spring that you're using. But definitely, if it's got a third spring, not the second spring, which should be a damper that runs around the outer the outer wire, you definitely want to pull that third spring out of there.
And my rule of thumb for engine break-in is, well, for flat tappet cams, I look at anything written past 2005. The big thing is just the zinc and the oils. Oh. Anything before that was all written by the older generation guys, the baby boomers, that this was their bread and butter. They didn't have roller cams. Everything was flat tappet. Mm-hmm. So I go back and I look at the historical information. Back in the mid-50s, I found an article by Racer Brown that he built. He was talking about cam break-in in Hot Rod Magazine in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And what they did was, he said, I purposefully overfill the engine with motor oil. Okay. And the whole idea is you're trying to create windage so you get the crank to throw oil up on the camshaft, because that's the biggest problem where you have failure, is that the cam's not being lubricated well enough as the lifter face is being, because what's happening is the cam is polishing the lifter to that cam load.
That's what they create. It's a microscopic metallurgical mating. And that's why you can't take a used lifter from one lobe and stick it on another lobe, because each individual lobe, there are so many different subtle differences in, like, let's just say the weight of the valve, right, as it's opening and closing, or the spring pressure. Well, you got a brand new set of springs, and it's still going to vary 10, 15, 20 pounds across the range. Right.
Another big one is rocker arm ratio. Rocker arm ratio, not every single one of them is exactly the same.
Yep. And then, of course, the fact that the camshaft's primarily oiled by splash, and not every part of the camshaft gets the same amount of splash. So if you're dealing with, let's say, lobes, a camshaft lobe that's directly adjacent to a rod, as the rod is spinning and it's throwing oil off, that lobe is going to have a ton of oil. And so the contact patch is going to be relatively narrow because it's going to be running primarily on a film of oil. Then you get, let's say, the lobe next to it. Doesn't get quite that same direct splash off the rod as it's spinning.
Right.
So it's going to have less of an oil film on the lobe, and so its contact patch, its fingerprint is going to be a little bit wider. So now if you take the one and switch it with the other, they have to go through that break-in process all over again, and that's where you wipe out oil.
Wipe the can.
Right.
Yep.
But well, we got any? And there was silence.
There are several questions. There seems to be a discussion back and forth on back pressure being a myth.
Oh, back pressure, like exhaust on the motor? That's what they're talking about?
We did a video on that actually. Yeah, but let's try to stick with valve train stuff tonight. We could talk about exhausts and headers and manifolds.
Right.
Oh, please. Once you get us started, you get a couple of tech heads together and it's like.
Well, you could have a discussion forever. It's literally like, man, we can push all this stuff aside, get a couple cold ones, and just sit around and talk all night.
Ron Ward just asked, what's the weakest link in a Buick engine?
Oh, the weakest leak? Oiling. Oiling is the big one. And it's not pressure that you want. I mean, okay, so that was the easy workaround on it, but it's oiling, the volume of oil. It depends which engine you're talking about. Like the small blocks have their own little thing, and the big blocks have their own thing as well. But it seems commonplace in all of them. It's oiling.
Well, you got a big main bearing that's got to get fed. You've got what I've seen, and the thing I've always bothered me the most about the Buick motors is the fact that it oils the camshaft from the side.
Right.
And on almost every engine you come across, all the popular engines, the cam bearings oiled from the bottom. So there's a passage that splits between the cam bearing and the main bearing. On the Buick, that oil galley runs alongside the cam bars. So it oils from the side instead of the bottom. And the direction, the cam bearing has to carry the oil all the way around before it gets to the bottom. So that's, okay, we got a question there.
Now, we have one question by Michael Bertoni earlier asking if you prime the oil pump, if you prime the oil system, and then another one here, how long after break-in should you put the inner springs back in?
Right after the break-in.
And yes, you prime the oil.
Yeah, I prime every single one of them, regardless of. I always want to make sure it has oil pressure because, like I said, the weakest link on these motors is oil.
What is the best break-in oil for a flat tappet engine, non-synthetic or break-in specific oil?
Well, okay, I'll show you what I do. I found that most break-in oils are pretty much the same. They all have a high volume of zinc and phosphorus, right? And those are the two minerals that you need for a thorough break-in. I just go down to O'Reilly's and I pick up some Royal Purple break-in oil. I've tried other ones, Brad Penn. I've also thought about, and I've never really had enough stones to do it, but just Rotella T makes a 1030, and it has 1,200 parts per million of zinc.
Right.
And I don't see why you couldn't break it in with that, but it's a big chance, a big gamble, because your whole motor's sitting there.
Yeah, the Rotella is good all by itself. It has enough zinc all by itself after the break-in, but not during the break-in. During that break-in period, you need that extra bit of zinc. So what I'll do is I'll use Rotella, but I'll use the zinc adder. I'll throw a quart.
ZDP.
Yeah, two halves. Okay. So I'm paying, so I'll double it up.
Right, and there's other ways around it. You don't even have to get a break-in oil. You can get conventional oil and then add in your ZDP like you're saying, or you can, STP actually has ZDP in it. And I've heard guys adding that in.
We got one there?
Robert Miller, how do you know how much timing to give your engine on first time startup?
Initial startup?
Yeah.
We'll go through that. It's a feel, believe it or not. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of different. You can get technical about it, but it's a feel. If you watch that video that we did last week, was it 2 weeks ago, when we got his 215 Buick started? Let's demonstrate it on this side.
Okay, and we're
Find a number one.
Oh, finding number one and all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So because he asked about how much timing, but without the engine running, especially if you've got an electronic ignition. If you're dealing with a point style ignition, then it's easy enough to find out the exact place in crankshaft degrees where the point's open. At that opening point, that's where your timing would be firing. So you could set, like for instance, if you set a magneto, core magneto, right? You'll bring the crankshaft, let's say you wanted to fire it at 35 degrees before top dead center. You'll set the crankshaft 35 degrees before top dead center. Give it a little tug in the direction of rotation because that takes a little slack out of the valve train, you know, the distributor drive, and then you can actually turn the distributor and move it to the point where the point's just open, and that's where it'll fire. So you can actually set a point type distributor to the exact degree that you want that thing to start at. With the electronic, it's a little bit more difficult because without the engine actually running, you're not getting that signal set. But we'll show you how you in just a little bit. We'll show you how you line up number one to make sure you get a first start.
The neatest thing I've ever heard on points engines is what you normally do is you rotate your crank around till you're up on top dead center, number one, and then put your mark where you want it for initial startup, like 8, 10, 12 degrees, something like that. And then with your points distributor dropped in, you can actually move that distributor and hook your timing light up to it and just watch the timing light. Hold down the button and you just move that distributor and it'll flash right when you're supposed to be arcing.
You can actually use a test light too. You could use a test light and use the points as the ground for the test light. When the light goes out, that's when it's going to fire. Question?
More like a couple of comments about zinc additive when it comes to braking oil. So could you just take a few minutes and just talk about like zinc additive and different oils, whether it comes with it or whatnot?
Okay. All right. In the old days, see a lot of guys. We have a lot of people that are in like the 20s and the 30s, and they don't understand that at one point it was zinc was a normal part.
This was regular oil.
Yeah, it was regular oil. ZDDP is what we're talking about, right? Because you might not see it as worded out as zinc. You'll see ZDDP. That was in all engine oils. That was a standard part of it because very few engines back in the day. And I say back in the day, up until the 1980s. Very few engines had roller cams. They all had flat tappet cams. And that is what the zinc is. It's a lubricant for that direct metal to metal contact. The relationship between the cam and the lifter is unique out of every other part of the engine. Like for instance, the rings ride on a film of oil, right? They float, the rings. But the cam and lifter is a direct metal to metal contact. And that's what keeps the lifter spinning, and that's what keeps it from wearing. So that ZDDP is it's like a microscopic lubricant for that exact point of contact. So when they went to roller cams, there wasn't needed in conventional motor oil anymore. So they took it out.
The biggest one was the emissions requirement. So it wasn't really emissions. What it was the ZDDP and the oil. If your car started consuming a little bit of oil, it would film your oxygen sensor. And once you filmed your oxygen sensor, you would start getting erroneous readings to the computer, and then you would add too much fuel, too little fuel, and it would cause the engine to malfunction, burn up, melt pistons down, bad things happen. And so when they took the ZDDP out to correct that, us flat tappet, hot rodders from the 50s through the 70s, we were kind of left out on our own, and nobody even mentioned it because, like, one day it was just gone.
Which was gone.
And then everybody's wiping cans. We couldn't figure it out. So,
in everyday operation, to stock flat tappet cams like the ones in the slant sixes, they need any ZPPD added.
After it's broke in.
After it's broken in, everyday operation,
After
you still need to add it.
There's enough zinc in. Now there are a bunch of different diesel oil truck. There's Rotella. There's Delvac, there's a bunch of different brands. If it's intended for diesel truck use, it'll have just enough zinc to keep one of our older engines happy, but not during the break-in. During the break-in, you need more zinc than is available in those oils. Now, I don't drive, everything I daily drive is vintage. And I use nothing but Shell Rotella in it, and I have zero problems with it. You know,
That's exactly how I do it too. I don't do any other oil.
Yeah.
That's what that is. That's Rotella tea.
and I don't get paid. Nobody gives me Shell Rotella oil. You know what I mean? Shell doesn't cut me a check.
Shell, step up.
All right, so 2 points. Either A, we need to get this engine running, because we have some demands here. Or B, there is apparently an audio issue, and they recommend closing the garage door. So
Okay.
I say we either get that engine running, or we close the door and continue to talk.
Well, let's close the door for the time being, and then we'll get the motor running in a little bit. I have to roll. I got to roll the cigarette. I'm going to make a
What's up?
And that's done. Okay. Is there any performance to be had in a set of lifters? I've seen a few different styles of lifters, but don't know what's the best.
Okay, and I'm assuming we're talking flat tappet only, or because there is performance based on it being a roller or it being a flat tappet camshaft.
Well, no, there is a difference between solid and hydraulic. You know, a solid lifter, a solid lifter will follow a profile, will transfer the lifter's profile more accurately to the rest of the valve frame.
Right.
You know, where on a hydraulic cam, there's always a little bit of cushion. You know, you'll achieve maximum lift with the hydraulic, but it's how the hydraulic comes onto the ramp. It doesn't. You get that little bit of a cushion. So it's how
it's also slowly tapered up that low.
Right.
For your hydraulic flat tappet lifter.
Right.
That was what I was getting at, is the roller, the roller, because it actually just follows the terrain of the. You can have a more aggressive ramp rate on the shaft.
Well, that's the benefit of a roller cam.
Right.
Because you can slam the valve open and then you can drop it closed real easy. But there is a performance difference. The performance difference between a flat tap hydraulic is all in the way it attacks the ramp.
Right.
Because the initial cushion, as the lifter is being shoved out by the load, that initial cushioning does soften the valve opening rate.
Right.
And that's the advantage between.
I've seen a couple comments on here about name brands of lifters. Are there any ones that you prefer? Name brands, manufacturers of lifters?
I am all about American-made stuff. And that's like, there's only a few American-made manufacturers. You know, one is Johnson, and the other one is.
I don't remember. I can't think of the name of it either. Somebody will jump in there and
I hope somebody does know. But that's really, the rest of them are not American-made. So I try to stick to the American-made stuff. But the quality lifters. Now back to that lifter performance thing. There used to be Rhodes lifters, which I'm sure there still is. Rhodes were a really novel idea.
Yeah.
Which were, what it was is, if you knew you put too radical of a camshaft in something, and then you killed the bottom end, you, instead of swapping the whole cam out and tearing the motor down, you could actually just pull the intake manifold, the rockers off, drop a set of Rhodes lifters in there, and Rhodes lifters had a higher bleed down rate.
Right.
And what they did was they allowed it to absorb even more of that ramp rate.
At low RPM, when the oil pressure is low, because the lifter has a high bleed down rate, there's a big cushion to it. So it'll bleed off some of the lift,
right?
Some of the duration.
And give you a vacuum.
Yeah.
Right? That was the.
As your RPM comes up, oil pressure comes up, the lifter gets stiffer and you get full opening. They still make them. And I never use them myself, but I do.
Very first hot rod motor, man, it ran good, but it clattered like it was like you had a bunch of bad lifters in it.
What is preferable for tappet lifters, solid or hydraulic?
It depends your application.
Depends what you're going for, really.
Yeah.
You know, the difference in street drivability is minute, right? Like you'll never on a typical engine, you know, let's use like 5,500 RPM, typical lift cam, like in the 500 range, 320 degree duration, you know, that sort of thing. You're not going to see the difference. You'll see the difference over 6 7,000 RPM. You'll see the difference once you go towards a 600 lift cam, big duration. That's when you'll start to see the difference between hydraulic and flat and solid. So if you're dealing with just a street driver, don't even worry about it. Just go to hydraulic and save yourself the agita of.
What are the specs on the cam and the Buick block?
Oh, this one here, it's actually a 1970 stock camshaft out of, it's a 370 horse Wildcat motor. So it's a stock factory Buick camshaft from 70. So I would have to say mundane, very mundane.
Uh-oh.
Are we online still?
No, a lot of comments right now.
Oh,
You can pick one.
how many people are up there? How many we got?
It's like 440-ish.
Oh, that's not bad.
For first time.
Yeah.
Have we already primed the engine?
Yes, the engine's already been primed.
Oh, yeah, he primed his engines. I don't prime mine. For no other reason, I haven't found a real reason to, but I don't deal with these Buicks. These things have very convoluted oiling systems, especially down there in the front cover.
Can we walk around the test stand? I'd like to see more of the test stand.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Here, we'll do this.
And can you go over some of the general differences in each of the GM big blocks?
Oh, wow. Well, there's a lot.
Okay. Yeah. Let's all right.
And someone else posted another question. What's up, Tony? How reliable are the Hellcats?
Oh, I have no idea. Here, turn it a little bit so that we can.
I'll just turn it.
Are you getting a good view of the?
Yeah, it's.
Okay. Oh yeah, there you go. All right. So now, how do you know? Obviously, there's no fan on this. How do you keep the?
We actually used a water hose because we
Okay.
found the fan is unreliable.
Okay.
Right. In this situation, on your car is fine because the motor is generally in line with the radiator.
Right. What about mounting an electric fan on the?
That was actually what we did today. Went to the junkyard and picked up a whole fan assembly out of Buick Roadmaster.
Okay. And so let's see. Show them the control, the other side of it.
My homemade control panel.
Yeah. I just want to make you spin the thing around.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm getting a workout in. All right, and I just use a 2-gallon fuel cell. The Holly pump is on there, but I don't have a regulator, and since this one has a factory mechanical pump, I don't even bother with it.
Okay.
And the start stand is made out of an old toolbox, and then I got an oil pressure gauge, water temperature, and then a tachometer, because that's the important part on this one. When you break in the cam, you want it to be centered around 2,000 RPM. You don't want to over rev it, and you don't want to have low RPM where you could have an oiling issue.
All right, I'm going to put this back up here. Right. I guess.
Okay, should flip it around some more. Maybe push it over. I was looking to get the last corner on, I guess. I'd like to see that it's actually just an engine stand on the back of a big.
Yeah. That's a nice old engine stand too. That's the real deal.
Yeah.
That's a no sag engine stand.
Right. All right. You ready to flip it around?
That's where we are.
Okay.
I don't know if we're in the shot anymore. We in the shot?
Yes, you're in the shot. Last question that we have here is, do you recommend cross drilling the crankshaft?
It depends on what you're trying to achieve. I would rather just use a fully grooved main.
And normal pump gas on this engine?
This one's 87 octane. That's what we started up on because it's not under any blow.
Right. if it's not under any load, I mean, you can have a 12 to 113 engine, it'll line just fine on 87 octane. It's when you put it under a load, that's when you have a problem.
Someone said, Tony, will you do a video of breaking in a cam at idle and then one at 5,000 RPM? Would the cameras be fun to see?
You want to do a break-in at 5,000 RPM?
We could try, not on this one, but
Why not? It's here.
I spent too much time just cleaning it. I don't want to get it all. Let's see.
If you're breaking in the cam, etc., halfway through it, is it safe to stop and start again?
Oh, that's.
Yeah, now, you want to avoid that situation at all possible costs. But it is better to abort completely, right? Stop the motor than let it run at a lower RPM. So let's just say you start this thing up, okay, and it's missing and popping and bucking, and it's just miserable, right? Rather than keep it running while you try to sort the problem out, cut it, right? And then start over again. Because if you let it idle for too long during that break-in period, that cam is getting starved from that oil splash that it needs, and you are going to wipe that thing out.
Yeah, that was our big thing with the Lemons motor. We just did the Lemons motor 2 weeks ago. Same start stand, same setup, the whole 9 yards. We put it together and put it on stand, took it outside, started it up. We had a fan on the front. Well, after about 10 minutes of breaking in, we noticed the temperature started climbing, got up to about 200, 220. And it was like, whoa, we're sweating bullets now, right? So we took the fan off, got the radiator hose out, put the garden hose just across the radiator to cool the water down, because you don't want to shut it off. But I definitely didn't want to overheat it either. So we ended up just running with the garden hose and it cooled off. But if it had gotten any hotter than 220, we would have just killed it, let it cool off, and then refired it and run another 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, the most important thing is don't let it run under 2,000 RPM. If it sounds like shit, it's throwing fireballs out of the carburetor. It doesn't make any difference. As long as you can maintain that 2,000 RPM, keep it there, right? If for some reason you can't maintain it and it's dropping down to like, the 800 RPM, 1,000 RPM, kill it. Straighten out your problem and then restart it from that point. But don't ever, during that first 20 minutes of runtime, don't ever let it drop below that 2,000 RPM.
So if you wanted to put an engine on a run stand where the starter bolted to the transmission rather than the engine, what would be the best way to solve the problem?
Well, that's something you got to do with the Chrysler products, because our starters bolt to the transmission, and General Motors bolt. Ford actually has the same deal, but General Motors all bolt the starter to the engine, so that's easy. If you're going to do this for a Chrysler, you would need to have a section of bell housing, attached.
Most guys use 4-speed bell housing.
Yeah, use a 4-speed bell housing. Well, you can just take just a torque plate or an automatic, cut it off. Give yourself a couple of inches there, and you can cut that off. This way, you got places to bolt the starter to. Also, with Chryslers, you can't do it with the our ring gear. Our starter ring gear is on the torque converter,
right,
not on the flywheel. So it's a little bit harder to do with a Chrysler than it is with a Ford or a General Motors car.
Is the Buick Big Block the lightest one in the GM family for this engine generation?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
This engine actually only weighs 25 pounds more than a small block Chevy.
Yeah, Buicks, they're crazy. That's one of the things I always love about them. They're light. You would think it's a giant hunk of, no, it's a lightweight deal.
Could you break it in by driving the crankshaft by other means than the cylinders?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a company, that the camshaft braking has become such a roulette thing, and there's so many people have failures with it. There's a company now, and I can't think of the name of it, but you send them your cam and lifters, and they break it in for you. They have all the popular engines mounted on with electric motors, and they spin the thing and break in your cam and lifters, and they send it back to you all set and ready to go.
But like a spin drum.
Yeah, anything, as long as you've got oil being thrown up at the camshaft, it doesn't matter how you drive it.
Do Nailheads make a good platform performance? Examples, 1965 GS.
Performance? No, man, this is going to hurt a lot of feelings. No.
The Nailhead, because of that valve arrangement,
and the size of it.
A lot of people don't realize that the reason a Nailhead looks the way it does is because instead of the valves being where you normally expect them to be on these engines. They're not on the exhaust side of the head, they're on the intake side of the head. So the push rod comes out like this, and the valve is straight up and down. And that's where the Nailhead name comes from. The exhaust ports on those things, like horrible. It's got to snake its way through the casting before it.
But don't get me wrong, that is the sexiest, one of the sexiest motors ever made.
Can you explain static testing?
Static testing.
In regards to what?
Yeah, exactly. In regards to what?
I'll look and see what pops up back up. Can you put the later heads on the Nailhead block?
No, that'd be great if you could. And you probably can if you were a really awesome machinist.
Do you have a Nailhead head around here?
I do not have any Nailhead stuff, but
How do you give Buick? I don't have any.
they're hard as crap to come by, Tony. They are really hard to find anymore. The neatest thing about the Buick big blocks and the whole engine family is it all grew from the Nailhead, right? The only reason this engine was even made was because the Nailhead was such a poor performer on the street. It is actually, in regards to performance on the street, it was more like street racing, because in a big full-size Electra or a Wildcat, they were pretty wicked. I mean, they had some good low-end torque, and they pull you around no problem.
Great low-end torque, but no power upstairs.
Yeah.
Okay, we got two. What if you just way overfill the oil pan during break-in so the crank is constantly splashing in a pool of oil during break-in? That's one. And then, are the break-in recommendations any different when using the EDM lifter with oil holes on the surface?
Oh, okay, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
All right, so overfilling the oil pan.
I do that all the time.
That's what I'll show you right now, America. I told you at the beginning, this sucker, let's see, full is about right here, and we're a quart and a half over. This is an old trick from what, like I said, I took it right out of Hot Rod Magazine. A guy called Racer Brown. A lot of the older guys are familiar with this guy because he was the real deal. I mean, Block Rare Pan America and stuff like that. I mean, this guy.
You're out of the shot, I think.
Oh, am I? Okay. Well, the Racer Brown, he wrote an article in Hot Rod Magazine explaining just this, that you are trying to create windage. That's the whole point of this, is to create windage. So add more oil, but if you go too far overboard, you're going to start blowing seals out and pushing seals out because it's got no place for the oil to go.
Right. See, that's the misunderstood part, or the least understood part about the break-in period. The entire purpose of running the engine at that RPM, at that accelerated RPM, is to get as much windage into the crankcase as possible to keep the camshaft lubed, right? Over lubed. It needs to be swimming in oil. So yeah, during a break-in period, throw an extra quart and a half in. That's fine. Don't worry about it, but after that, yeah, you want to go right back to your regular fill.
Right. And then there was another question, the EDM lifters, right?
Right.
Okay, so those are the lifters that actually have the cool face oil, like that I put in that super stock motor. Okay. Right? I can't see there being any difference between them, with the exception of it is direct face oiling. You're still going to have to do a camshaft braking on them, except for you're probably going to have oil on the surface all the time. And you don't have to go overboard, but I would, in my personal opinion, I'd break it in just like any other flat tap came in.
Lash is super important with those lifters.
Really?
Well, yeah, because you're bleeding oil, right? So not so much lash, but preload, right? You need to have sufficient, like for instance, if you're dealing a non-oil through pushrod engine, you can go for zero preload, right? You can go for a zero lash, zero preload situation, but if you're using those lifters, then you absolutely have to have preload in the lifter, otherwise you've got an oil leak, an internal oil leak, which doesn't seem like a big deal, except that it's competing now with the oil that's getting sent to the rockers anywhere.
And the rods, everywhere else, right? So it's actually, if you look at it, you got 16 internal oil leaks. Right? It's not just the one.
All right. Some person asked Tony what the rarest part he owns is. So I guess your rarest car part. And then another person wants to share with you their Buick 55 and wants to, if you can get an email, send you pictures.
The rarest thing I own is I have a set of D4 NASCAR hemming heads. So I think it's the rarest thing. I have to go through my shelf. There's probably odds and ends that I've forgotten that I've even.
I wish I could see. I don't have that problem. Everything I got is pretty much just commonplace.
I don't like rare stuff. You have to worry about rare stuff.
Yeah, people want rare stuff and they'll take it any means possible.
It depends on what you use it. Some people are collectors and they put a value on the rarity of things. You know, I'm not a collector at all. I'm a hot rod. I want to hammer the shit. And if I break it, I want to laugh. I was like, oh look, I broke it.
Yeah.
So throw it in garbage and start all over again.
Not like, oh man, I broke my D4 Hemi.
Right, right. If I ever build an engine that I can't like completely like scatter and just sit back and laugh, I don't want to ever own that engine. How's that sound?
I can understand that.
Because I've been there. I have been there. I've been for the expensive.
Tony, have you heard anything from Scott's Guadango lady? I'm sorry, I butchered that last name. And for those who don't know about his badass Buick, could you share some stories?
I talked about Scotty.
The Buick's video, right? When they have?
Yeah, it was Scotty Guadango was PG Performance, and him and his dad, Patty, who passed a couple of years ago. Which did you know that? Well, I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, he's down in Florida now. They want to. How's he running? I'm not even sure what class he's running. He's just an overall outlaw guy. I don't know what he's running right now. But yeah, Scotty was. I talked to him, I guess it was about 2 years ago. I am going to get together with him soon, and we'll do a tour of the shop. And he's a really fascinating character. You guys are going to kick out. Dale Creasy died today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I did not see that.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys follow older funny car stuff, but Dale Creasy. I learned a lot from Dale. He shared some really insightful knowledge with me back when I was learning the nitro thing. But yeah, he passed today. He had a string of funny cars. The Tyrant cars from the late 60s, early 70s, had this Torino body car that was just like over the top. Gary Bolger drove for him back in the late 80s, the 90s, the Creasy family thing. So yeah, Dale passed today.
And that's my favorite period of funny cars. It's like, I'd say 70 to 75, 78, yeah, somewhere around there.
That was Dale's era. Yeah. That was Dale's era.
Man, the cars were beautiful. They still looked like the regular car, but they were stretched out. The Monzas took it to a whole new level, but there was Corvettes and all kinds of stuff.
Do you have to move the Windage tray for breaking the cam in if there's one that's going to be used on the engine? Does the Windage tray affect break-in?
Yes and no. It does its job. It reduces the amount of oil that's getting up there. But again, holding that steady 2,000 RPM and overfilling the crankcase a little bit. I'll tell you what, if you've got a Windage tray in the motor, definitely overfill it by a quart. Don't go crazy, but definitely overfill it by about a quart or so, just to be sure, just to make sure that the oil level is at least up at the Windage tray level. So as the rod comes down and swings through it, grabs a scoop of oil and just throws it out.
That's what I do. Every one of these Buicks has a factory Windage tray. So they're normally this is a 4-quart engine. It tells you that on the dips, right? 4 quarts, right? And that doesn't include the filter, really, but you're looking at 4.5. I put 6 in it every time, just to break them in. 1, you know you got more oil than what you need. 2 is it's past that Windage tray. So your crank throws are actually dipping down in that oil, slinging it up inside the motor. That's the whole idea.
Yep.
and point of this.
Can't stress that enough. The whole point of that 2,000 RPM for 20-minute break-in period is to saturate the camshaft in oil. So take whatever measures you have to make sure that that thing is just wet, you know?
You want to go ahead and fire it up?
Did you want to walk through greasing the lifter? Do you want to do any stuff like that? Like you got to pre-grease the lifters or any of that stuff?
Yeah, we definitely want to go through that. Now, there's also the debate about whether you fill the lifter ahead of time. A lot of guys, a lot of old school knowledge, right, is to fill the lifters with oil, or hydraulic lifter, obviously. Fill the lifter with oil before you put it in the motor. Now, if you read the literature from any camshaft manufacturer, when they tell you about the setup here, they'll all say universally, do not fill the lifter with oil. The lifter is designed so that when it's empty, okay, it will still open the valve enough to get the engine started. All right, so you're not going to get full lift. Let's say you got a 500 lift cam, okay? If the lifters are not pumped up, you'll still get 200 thousandths or so lift at the valve, which is enough to get the engine started and running. Now, the reason why listen to me, okay, listen, because this is going to be all, you don't know what he's talking about. Listen to me. The reason you never pre-fill the lifters, pump them up pre-fill, is because there's no guarantee that they're going to bleed down. So when you go to start the engine, you may have valves that are hung open. It'll keep the engine, it'll keep you running on the starter, right, which is bad. You want this thing to start within the first couple of rotations, boom, and it's running. If you've got those lifters pre-filled and they don't bleed down enough, because they all have different bleed down rates, and it all has to do with like the way they're manufactured. You can't, not everything. No two lifters are exactly the same. If the lifter is pumped up and it won't release the valve train, or there's a good chance you're going to blow it on that initial start. You may have to crank the engine, let's say 100 revolutions before the lifters bleed down enough to actually create enough compression.
And it's not slinging oil.
Right, and all you need is one intake. You only need one intake valve, not seated, to keep the whole engine from starting. Because every time the spark plug fires air, it's trying to light up into the intake manifold.
Is there a way to test the hardness without damaging the lifter?
There is, but I don't know what it is. Oh, I'm not equipped for it.
Yeah, a machine shop can test it for you, but that's about the only way I know of. So every time you get a cam, no matter who you get it from, I have a couple of cams, but they used to send a little package of grease, and all the Cryer ones I got came with this Lucas racing assembly grease. You probably have seen this stuff is blue, right? It's the only grease I've ever seen that looked like this. But every time I got a Cryer cam, it came with a little package of this grease. It was just enough to do the cam, the lifters. You're actually supposed to put it on every lobe, and then you want to put it on the face of the lifter and on the sides of the lifter, right?
Yeah, well now, I want to show someone who's got a question.
What cam and lifter lube do you recommend? Have you ever used Molly Lube?
Yeah, that's how they used to do them.
Yeah.
I actually have some on
The black stuff.
Yeah, I got them too. That's what we used in the Lemons motor because I didn't have any of that blue grease.
Yeah.
And, but this is what the old timers used, was this stuff.
Yeah, it's molybdenum. Molybdenum. Go ahead, say it. Yeah.
Molybdenum.
Molybdenum.
Can't really see.
But it's black. And it's like it's got a charcoal color to it.
Yeah, it works good. It works good.
This stuff is made for high pressure. That's what extreme pressure anti-seize engine assembly lube with moly graphite, right? Which is molybdenum graphite. It's meant for that initial turn of the camshaft, not 100 rotations like Tony was saying. You want it to be 1, maybe 2 revolutions, and it fires up.
Like right off. Now, here's the thing, okay? A couple things as far as lifters go. You got a new lifter?
It's right in front of the motor.
In front of the motor? Okay. You have a flat surface?
I doubt it very flat.
Anything.
Put it on a table.
Well, no, it's got to be like dead flat. Okay, so go ahead. You had a question.
How does one test a lifter aside from pumping them up? If the lifter doesn't bleed down, doesn't that suggest they're defective?
Not necessarily. It may take. Okay, so you got 16 lifters in a V8 engine, right? So it may take. They all came from the same manufacturer, but this one here may bleed down with X amount of pressure, and the one next to it may bleed down with X amount of pressure. They're not necessarily going to all be the same. But if you've got this thing pumped completely full, it means that you've taken all of the preload out of it. So when you tighten down the valve train, it's not necessarily going to compress the lifter until the thing is actually running. So that's why you never want to fill these things. Just put them in there dry. Now, what he's talking about, the lube, before you even do that, you want to take the lifter here. Here's my phone. You want to take the lifter. The lifter is ground with a little bit of a crown to it. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to put the lifter on a flat surface, like a piece of glass is perfect, and you want to be able to make sure that you can rock it back and forth. If you can't rock that lifter back and forth, it's ground flat, and that's a mistake. There's always a taper here, and the same, or a crown, I should say. And it's the same thing with the lifter lobe. You can't really test it, but the lobe is ground with an angle.
Level.
Right? And it's the outer edge of this meeting with the outer edge of the lobe that causes the thing to rotate. And that rotation is what keeps it from wearing. As long as it's spinning, it won't wear. Now, when you talk about the lube, this is important. As soon as the motor starts, the instant the motor starts, this lifter has to be rotated. It's got to be spinning. A lot of guys will take that lube and they'll cover the whole lifter with it and drop it into the bore. That lube it takes a lot of breakaway. It takes a lot of breakaway tension to move it. So if you've coated the whole lifter with that thick, the braking lube, grease, any of the braking lube, it won't want to rotate until the motor is actually running and it's got some heat to it, and then it'll start to. So what you want when you coat the lifter, only coat the surface of it that's going to that's going to contact the cam, and don't ever lube this. I mean, if you want to make sure it's all like happy and wet, right? Then I mean, you could use you could spray the lifter boards down with like what I do is I'll spray them down with PV Blaster, which is just a lightweight lubricant, and it just makes sure that this surface here has got minimal friction against the bore. But you don't ever want to, when you drop this thing in there, you don't ever want to have lube around the outside of it like this, because that'll keep it from rotating.
Oh, well, I didn't know that. I was actually taught the other way.
Really?
I thought to put grease on the outside here.
No,
Yeah.
no, you don't like it. And then the lifter drop is important too. You're assembling a motor, right? Okay, here. I don't know if we can we rotate this thing just in here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
All right. So
Question.
prep of the engine, right? Before you assemble this thing, you want to take new lifter, right? Put it in the bore and make sure that it falls freely, just like that. Okay? It has to, listen to me, you have no idea how important this is, okay? It has to be able to fall just like that. If you have to push this lifter down into the bore, that means the bore is dirty. It's got to be either honed, whatever you got to do. But watch this. This is exactly, if it does not look like this, you're going to have trouble. Look, oh, just like that. The lifter has to free fall into the bore.
So that's irony at its finest, because this engine, I'm not gonna lie, when I got this sucker, they had a family of rats living in here.
Okay.
And they had all pissed all over these lifters. They were all new, the cam was new, everything was new, but they climbed inside the motor. And when I got the motor, I had to beat the lifters out.
Oh,
and then I had to hone, well, I used a brake hone.
Yeah,
brake
wheel
cylinder
cylinder
hone.
hone, yeah.
And I went down in here.
Yeah, we use a wheel cylinder hone on that. But listen to me, this is the one thing that nobody ever talks about, okay? Is like, this is crucial. Take that lifter, drop it, right? And it's got to do that. If it doesn't do that, you will smoke that lifter. All right.
All right.
Won't pre-oiling the pump up the lifters?
Yes, but the valve spring is the valve spring won't allow the lifter to pump past the preload point. See what I'm saying? So that's okay. It's when you pre-pump them up and you drop them in. Now you're going to tighten down your rockers, okay? And your rocker, when the valve is completely closed, may not have enough spring pressure to achieve that preload. So now when you go to start the motor, a couple of lifters are pumped up, a couple of valves are open, and it's going to sneeze, buck, backfire, all kinds of shit. And you'll wipe out the motor, you'll wipe out the cam on the starter.
So we're encroaching on 55 minutes of the live stream.
Okay.
And would you like to continue to ask your questions or move forward with the stand and the engine?
The stand's going to be about 20 minutes. That's it. That's if we break it in the whole time on the video.
Yeah. All right. So now you've already set up the distributor on this?
I've already set it all. It should fire right off the hip.
Okay. So I just want to show you guys real quick, right? Can we pull another one plug out of here? Yeah. And pop the distributor cap off?
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to talk about the initial start, when you're going for that first start.
I think it's got too much tension in this flow wire.
What's that?
I just couldn't get the sucker loose. I had too much tension from the side.
See, I'm gonna steal one of your cigarettes out of the wall, Mike. How are we doing with this feed, guys? Is this a good show? I don't know. You guys enjoy it, that's all?
It sounds like a lot of questions, so I'm thinking people are intrigued. No, I can't speak on behalf of everyone. I'm having a good time.
You always have a good time.
Love it, good stuff.
Okay, cool.
All right. No kidding.
All right, so now in regards to, did you pull the plug out yet? Or
Not yet.
Okay.
Several people want you to light a cigarette as soon as we fire this engine off.
Like an after sex smoke.
Wouldn't it be funny if it just throws crank on the ground?
No, that wouldn't be funny. I would be heartbroken. That's a lot of work and effort.
I know. You did a beautiful job detailing this thing, man.
Thanks. Yeah.
You guys, it's a shame you can't see this. It's like a piece of jewelry. It really is beautiful.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time cleaning it up and blasting a lot of parts in the the blast cabinet.
And this is a 455.
This is a 455 Buick, yeah. This is actually a 74 block with 71 heads and 70 pistons in it with the 70 Wildcat camshaft.
All right.
Is the block smooth?
Is the block what?
Smooth.
No. It's
All right.
just an S-cast.
So this is for you guys that are unsure about starting your engine for the first time. Okay, because not everybody has that years of experience where you can just like smell something and know how it's going to go. So this is just for you guys that are just like, okay, I want to try this, but I'm not really sure. I'm a little apprehensive. That first start is absolutely critical, right? It's got to start within the first couple of rotations of the deal. So what you want to do is, now remember, your timing mark here, you're going to hit that twice for every one cycle of the engine, right? So when the timing mark lines up with the marker here, you're top dead center. You could be top dead center exhaust stroke, or you could be top dead center compression stroke. If you're putting the motor together for the first time, and you've gone dot to dot, this is really important, okay? For you guys who aren't that experienced. You put the motor together and it's dot to dot, okay? And you put your timing cover on it, and then you're gonna go drop your distributor in it because, well, you're a top dead center and it's dot to dot. If you drop your distributor in and line it up with number one, when it's dot to dot, you're gonna be 180 degrees out, okay? Because dot to dot signifies top dead center of the exhaust stroke at the number one cylinder. That's that split overlap period where all camshaft measurements are taken, okay? You actually have to rotate the crankshaft 360 degrees, which rotates the camshaft 180 degrees. And when the two dots are facing straight up, that's when number one is ready to fire. Okay, does that make sense?
That's correct.
Okay, I got it. Okay. All right. So now, let's just say you don't recall where it was, or you rotated the engine afterwards, right? And you don't know where your marks are anymore. So what you want to do is you want to bump the thing, you want to take the number one spark plug out, okay?
Yeah. You want me to, there's some manifolds on there, I'll hook the battery up so you can actually do it
Okay.
right from the butt.
So I know this is like overly simplified stuff for you, like advanced cases, right? But you know, there's a lot of guys don't know this stuff. It's simple, I know, but they don't know it.
All right.
So
You want me to just bump it?
yeah, so what you do is, listen to me, number one spark plug out, okay? Put your finger in the spark plug hole, and like 90% of the engines you come across, you can do that, right? If you've got let's say an engine, let's say that has spark plug tubes, like a later model motor, let's say an open can motor,
4.6.
Then you've got to do something like, for instance, you could put a paper towel, okay, into the hole, right? There's a couple of different methods of doing it, but let's just go with this. you want to do is you want to bump the engine, put your finger over the spark plug hole and bump the motor. Okay, give me a bump. Go, go, right there. Okay, so did you hear the compression piss past my finger? At that point, that's when you're going to line up your marks. So bump it again, just a quick bump. Okay, right there. See, now we're still in compression. You can hear the compression come past my finger. And right here, now, here's our timing mark, and here's our scale. So right now, we're at where this thing is going to want to fire the number one spark plug. Where the rotor is facing, okay, is where you're going to start number one on the cap. You may want to, I have found, right, while you can wire this thing any way you want, as long as the rotor is facing in that direction at this point, what I have found is that if you go with the factory, where the factory originally put this, the wire routing is a lot smoother. There's a reason why they...
It's exactly
right. So, you know, you can take a shortcut and just run your wires to here. This is number one now, you know.
Right.
But I go out of my way to make sure that the rotor is in the position that the factory designed it to be, because the wire routing is just that much cleaner. So at this point, this thing is ready to fire. So, yeah, go ahead, you can put that back on there.
Okay.
All right, real quick. So, Dallas, could you clarify what gas we're using for this test here, as well as we have a question about the exhaust manifolds, if they're anything special about them, performance, whatnot?
No, exhaust manifolds are off of, I believe they're probably 70, 71, something like that. They're not performance ones. There is a 67 driver side exhaust manifold for if you run across a Buick 430 with a big torque Wildcat motor in it. The 67 exhaust manifolds are supposed to flow more. I've never had a set, so I can't really verify that.
You know, the thing about Buicks is even their low performance exhaust manifolds are beautiful. Like they're like cast headers almost. Very nice manifold. You know, they're not like a log. You know what I mean? If anything, the only down part, it's just a beautiful casting. The only downside to it is this tight turn right here. You know, because you come out of the port and then it makes a quick 90. So there's no real, you know. The exhaust gas goes, the exhaust charge
There's no scavenging there.
Yeah, there's not really much of scavenging there. Not bad at low RPM, but once you get over like, you know, once you get into the happies over like 5,500 or so, it's just that exhaust goes, and it just wants to pile up and push back into the head.
And that's fine, because at 5,500 is where any Buick owner, their butt starts squinching anyway, because they're afraid it's not going to oil at that point.
Well, you got to realize something about Buick motors in particular, and what makes Buick so unique, okay, is that they were designed around the Dynaflow, right? The ideology of the Dynaflow, you know, which is just. Can you even explain what a Dynaflow is to these people?
It's really more or less like a torque converter, slipping torque converter transmission. That's really all it is.
Right. The Dynaflow, it wasn't a normal automatic transmission. It was a torque converter. Is all it was. So for Buick motors to be tuned, and what years did you use the Dynaflow? From 19?
Dynaflow went all the way to 64 when Turbo 400 came out. So 63.
And what was the first year for it?
Oh man, that would have been
49.
50, whatever 264 Nailhead came out.
Yeah, 49 or 50 was the first year for it. So the Buick engine design philosophy was different than the other divisions. The Buick engine design philosophy was to work with that Dynaflow, which meant that you needed gobs of low end and mid-range torque. So these engines all work like a bastard at like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 RPM. Nothing makes more torque than a Buick. And that's because of that Dynaflow. And even after they went to the Turbo 400, the Buick design philosophy, the engine philosophy, kind of stuck, and that's why up until the early 70s, you had all of these engines were just torque beasts, because that was the Buick thing.
The mantra, yeah. It was a switch pitch variable speed torque converter. So it was it was essentially like, it was probably the closest thing today that you would see would be like this, the
CVT.
the CVTs in like the Asian cars, right? I don't know if they have an American car, but
Yeah, they have some CVTs. But the Dynaflow is the worst possible transmission. They wanted, the Buick engineers wanted to have seamless performance. They didn't want you to feel a shift, right? That was the whole thing, okay? So they didn't want you to feel a shift. So that's why they had this torque converter, this special torque converter. And the Buick engine had to make up for this insanely inefficient, terrible design. And that's why these things are as magical as they are.
I agree 100%. I mean, that's really what they had to
Look, a lot of
overcome.
people don't understand why Buick. You know what I mean? It's like they look at all those, like they had the Buick versus the Hemi GTX thing, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, why is Buick so fucking strong? Why does this thing do what it does? Well, that's why. Because they were designed around terrible
Yeah,
transmission.
it'd be like this, like going outside with a giant ball of marble and pushing it uphill, right? That was the life of a Buick engine in a LeSabre with a 2-speed well, it's not a 2-speed, it's a Dynaflow.
Well, it wasn't just the transmission too. It was the rear end.
Yeah.
Because Buick, like Cadillac, wanted no floor pan. Like they didn't want a training tunnel. Okay, so they designed special rear ends in these cars that have the pinion like down in the weeds, and like a 4.9-inch, only like much more. Okay, and so with that was that drop the drive shaft height way down low, and it left for more
Flat floor.
a flatter floor. But those rear ends take a huge amount of torque to turn. So between the transmission robbing torque and the rear end robbing torque, they had to make up for it with tuning for torque. And that's why, I guess, that's the magic of a Buick.
So that was my idea when I put one in that Suburban, right? That Suburban, I figured, okay, that Suburban weighs 6,500 pounds, something around there. That's maybe only about 1,000 pounds more than a fully loaded Electra.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, well, if that fully loaded Electra run around getting 14, 15 miles a gallon, I bet the Suburban would do the same. And it's shaped like a box, right? Literally going down the road. Well, the first time I took it out to an AHRA event, which was in Hertford, North Carolina, it averaged 14.1 for 12 hours, right? And it was because you're running down the road, 2,400 RPM. That sounds like a lot. It's got no overdrive, right? It's 3-speed, but you just kept it right at the torque band. It didn't take any fuel for the thing to make enough torque to keep it going down the road.
We get away from the topic. All right. Uh-oh, he fell asleep.
Now, there's mostly comments, but.
There was another question that somebody had earlier.
Oh, about the gas, years and what?
It's 87 octane. We're just breaking it on a stand. There's no load on it whatsoever. It's literally just a flywheel. So it'd be like a saw blade on here.
Yeah, it doesn't
the flex blade.
For static braking, when the thing is just sitting there and you're not putting a load on it, any gas will do. It's not,
Yeah, but the motor is, it has 10 1/4 pistons in it, but it's about 10-to-1 compression.
There's several comments in here about brands of oil filters. Do you want to weigh in on what you usually use, and then more comments about firing this thing out?
Well, I was brought up to be a Fram guy, and it has come to light recently within the past 10 years that I might as well just have like a freaking trash can hanging off the side of the motor. I don't know. I stick to any of the common brands. Wix is a good one.
Wix, Purolator. But Fram, they've had Fram. They actually reached out to me. They wanted Fram.
Really?
Yeah, recently they wanted me to be what do you call it? Not a spokesman, influencer. You know what I mean?
Oh.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
I'm sorry. But the sad part is, Fram used to be on every pro stock car in like the 70s and early 80s. Oh my gosh, if you didn't run a Fram, you had garbage.
Have you used an Oberg?
No.
Really?
I'll tell you the neatest one I found. All right, man, I got a list of them. I went to Tractor Supply, and in Tractor Supply, they had tractor oil filters. And I started looking at them because, see, the Buicks always had like these little DP oil filters, right? And I'm like, man, I want a big honking oil filter like a Chevrolet, something that's like a PH5 hanging on the front, right? And I can't find anything. And I needed something that was 13/16 thread, and it needed to have the same diameter as the Buick. Well, there they had can't remember, it's a company in Iowa, and that's all they do is tractor and industrial oil filters, like Burgesson or Burgelson or something. They're American made. There's like a orange, so hopefully somebody knows what they are. They're in an orange canister, says their name on them. I can't remember where they're at. They're in Iowa. I don't remember the name of them. It was the neatest thing. I went to their webpage, and you could search by size. You could search by thread pitch. You could search by diameter.
It would be helpful for these guys if you could remember what the
name is. I'm trying to think of, well, I might have it here on my phone.
Somebody will come up with it. I noticed that a lot of guys who built Buick motors back in the day use remote filters.
Oh, Buicks?
Yeah.
Well, and that's because you had that small little filter,
Yeah.
right? But they didn't have much room on them at all for, I mean, if you've got anything in there, especially during startup, during break-in, I don't even mess around with anything oiling. I take the filter off as soon as it's done, throw it stuck in the trash,
Yep.
Put a whole new filter on it because it's got grease from what's been on your cam and Buicks. You pack the oil pump full of Vaseline so that it'll get primed, and all that goes right in your filter.
Now, on my first bus, I don't pre-lube the motor like he does, but I always fill the filter with oil. And you know, you can't just fill it once, right? You fill it and then you wait like 30 seconds and it's empty again. So I make sure that the oil filter is filled with oil.
Baldwin filters.
Baldwin filters. Come and look at that.
Yeah, if you work for Baldwin Filters, give me a call. I'd like to talk to you guys because this is a pretty cool setup we got going on, and I'd really like to work with you.
So yeah, anyway, I'll start with the oil pump. I make sure that the oil pump has got some pre-lube in it, and I'll fill the oil filter, but that's really as far as I go. Where you go all the way.
I prime the whole stuff. Yeah, but that's like Buicks, they just don't oil well, so I don't give them a reason to have an oil issue.
What do we got?
Start
it.
That's
what
right saying, man.
They're all ready.
Everybody wants to start. We're gonna start in here.
Oh, we can.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, it's gonna be
last man standing shuts it off. How's that sound? You'll leave the door closed, and the last guy standing shuts it down.
Yeah. Well, we'll get it, and
so yeah, what he's doing now too. If you're doing with a carburetor and engine, always fill the bowl with fuel ahead of time because you don't want to have the thing cranking while it's pumping the oil up. So he's got a squirt bottle here, and he's filling the bowl vent on this Rochester. But you do the same thing on a Holly. You do the same thing on an Edelbrock. A lot of the Edelbrock style carburetors don't have what looks to be like a vent tube like this, or you find on a Holly, but alongside the drop rods, you'll see like a rectangular opening. That is a bowl vent. So just fill the bowls from that point. Or of course, if you have a fuel pump, run the electric fuel pump and fill the bowl first.
Okay, I think we're
ready.
ready.
You like?
Yeah, I think so.
Garage door?
No, we gotta do this thing where the last guy is still awake.
Well, remember, did you want to, we normally push it outside. It doesn't have a fan on it right now.
Oh, so how long will this thing run before it needs?
Maybe 5 minutes.
Oh, that's not gonna be enough.
No.
All right. So we're gonna have 20 minutes of like noise, so we're not gonna be able to talk really.
Right. Now I can push it outside.
Yeah, well, it's gotta run for that 20 minutes.
Right. I can push it outside like I normally do and put the garden hose on it.
Let's do it.
Okay.
I'll hang out with you guys.
It's gonna take you a few minutes to get it set up, so let's just chat them off.
I'll hang out with them while you do that. Okay. Okay. Well, I don't have my glasses or anything. Can you read that?
It's mostly people telling you to fire it up.
All right, it's gonna happen. Relax. So you guys enjoying the show? Is this a good thing that we should keep doing, or what? I don't know. You know, because we can come up with a different topic. Actually, in the comments, if you've got any topics that we can cover, let's say next Wednesday, because I'd like to make this a regular Wednesday night thing. You know, we do a regular or Sunday night show, which is like more general. You know what I mean? But I want to do a Wednesday night tech only show. So if you guys think that's a good idea, you want to keep it, you want us to keep doing this, you know, let us know and give us some suggestions, you know, what you think would make for good topics going forward.
Dallas, do you in hand?
I'm all right.
Dakota says no.
Dakota hasn't been timed out yet? Who are our mods on here tonight? Yeah, guys, I'm sorry I haven't acknowledged any of our regulars, but and Uncle Kathy knows the regulars, but he doesn't know anybody yet. So I assume John Wilburn is here. He's always here. What's so funny?
A couple of comments about engines running away.
So we got to go all the way down there?
Oh, do you want me to bring it closer?
Well, yeah.
I can bring the hose up there.
Yeah, bring the hose up here.
We can reposition and make this more intimate.
It'll be all right.
We'll all run down this way.
Yeah, I think we're better with the motor out there because we could probably still talk and whatnot. We'll just have to do it loudly. If you face the exhaust out that way. Can you hear that?
I think I got the brake. Yeah. I'm just gonna put it around, I guess. Is that exhaust facing that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now
That's
we gotta
good.
get around to the driveway, so.
at least see it.
All right, can you see it from here?
You can see it.
Okay, good, because we're gonna be spraying it, right?
We're gonna spray it.
Yeah, I gotta spray it with garden.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the only way that you know it's gonna keep it cool. You wanna make that 20 minutes regardless. So I mean, this is how I do it. You know, we've had nothing but issues with Bayman trying to keep it cool. So you don't want to turn it off during break-in. So we just go straight to the garden hose.
How do you set the carburetor?
How do I set the carburetor? Well, initially it's just kind of set up willy-nilly. This one's, I kind of cheated because this is our start-stand carburetor.
Okay.
It's been on 3-4 different motors. And right now it's just set up for it to idle. As soon as it comes up, I'll hold the throttle with my thumb,
Okay.
2,000 RPM, and then I'll turn the screw
Right.
until it's actually holding it.
Yeah, I do the same. That's pretty much what I do. So you just start with the carburetor in the normal position, you know, for your first start there. So the throttle blade in its normal position, hold the throttle open, you know, to achieve your basic around 2,000 RPM. You go a little bit higher, 2,500 is fine. And then set your idle stop screw to match that so you can take your hand away from it. Now also, if it's a little on the cooler side, I always keep a squirt bottle handy. I don't know how he does it, but on an engine that doesn't have a choke hooked up, or any choke at all for that matter, I always keep a gasoline squirt bottle handy so that I can feed the engine, because without a choke, you know, it's not going to want to idle when it's cold. So what I'll do is I'll feather the throttle, get the RPM up there, and then as it starts to come down because the engine's cold, I'll give it a couple of drops, the squirt, the hint, you know, from the squirt bottle, and that keeps it running. And you balance that back and forth for probably a minute or so, and then you should be able to run on our own. You got any questions?
Latest question is, how do they break in cams on mass-produced cars?
Oh, it used to be 500 miles, no wheel on.
Yeah, anymore they don't, because it's all roller. Roller cam doesn't require any braking at all. Just turn the key and go. But for in the flat tappet days, they would run in a break-in cycle. It was part of the last stage of the assembly line was the break-in cycle.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. I thought when you bought them, they had a 500-mile braking cycle, didn't they? Or is that just for the
That's
rings?
for the rings.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought there was cam as well.
No.
Latest question, when you flop pistons, what it's done to the rings? Anything?
What was that now?
When you flop pistons?
Flip them. No, doesn't affect them at all.
No. Okay, everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Let me put the timing light on it. We'll verify the timing. Once we get fired up.
Now remember that initial start is so important because ahead of time you coat the cam and the lobe and the lifter with an assembly lube. But every time that thing rotates, as you go through the starting cycle, it's scraping more and more of that off. So you only get like, let's say 30, 40 revolutions or so before it's essentially gone and you didn't really lubricate anything.
Timing when doing the initial start, 8 degrees.
On this one, the Buicks run ideally at 12 initial. I always set them at 12. I don't mess around. They always start beautifully there. They run great there. They don't usually spark knock as long as you dial the rest of the timing curve in.
Right.
With your timing set initially at 12.
I don't when I'm setting up a regular engine, if I'm setting up a real high performance motor, then I'll go through all of the steps, including turning the rotor hard in the direction of rotation, or against the direction of rotation, I should say, to make sure that the timing is going to be pinpoint accurate for that first initial hit. But for like a regular street engine like this type of thing, what I'll do is I'll set the initial timing the way I showed with just find the compression stroke, get the marks to line up, give the distributor a little bit of advance, because you ever watch all these TV shows when they go to start an engine and it's always like, and then it just like, it kind of like sputters to life and it backfires up to the carburetor a couple times. It's always, right? That's because what they're doing is they're setting it up for true top dead center. So what I do is I set it up for the true top dead center, and then I give the distributor a little bit of tweak in the direction of advance. And generally, like 999 times out of 1,000, it'll like boom, just like that. And then you can make small adjustments afterwards with a timing light, but you generally don't have to for that braking period.
Yeah, braking. I usually, like I said, I set it with I put the harmonic balancer in the mark.
Mm-hmm.
On the mark on the harmonic balancer dead up on 12, and then I put my just like I told you before, the timing light. I'll turn it until that timing light goes off.
But as soon as you see it flash,
and then it's like, oh, we're at 12.
So on topic, someone asked, are you breaking in the entire engine or just the cam and lifters? Another person wants to know when you're going to put a Hemi in one of your cars.
In this case, he's only doing the cam and the lifters. Breaking in rings is a different process, and some rings take a break. Like for instance, a moly ring, a stainless ring, your low tension rings really don't take much. Anything that has a very fine cylinder wall polish finish don't really take much of a break-in period. When you deal with an engine that has older cast rings and a coarse bore hone finish, those things will take 300 to 500 miles for it to really actually seat the rings and be happy. You'll notice when you start, your initial start on a cast ring engine, you'll always see the headers will glow cherry red for the first, let's say, minute or so, 2 minutes that the engine is running, because of all of that friction of the rings, carbon, finding their home against cylinder walls, and then it'll go away and you'll never have that happen again. And then from that point, it takes another 300 to 500 miles of cycling the engine, varied RPM, varied load, to get the rings to really seat and be happy. But right now, it's just gonna do the cam. When am I putting a Hemi in my car? I'm building a nitro motor, but not yet. I've got too many other things that have to get done first. We're building our way towards that. We're starting with the small, easy, simple things that anybody can relate to. So that's why we're doing a lot of 318 stuff, slant 6 stuff, because it doesn't take any money, it doesn't take any exotic tools, doesn't take any experience to build an engine along those lines. As this channel evolves, we'll start to get more into the crazier stuff. But for right now, we're going to focus on the simple, cheap bread and butter and how to get the most out of your simple, cheap bread and butter junk.
All right, you ready to do this?
Ready to do it. We should probably, can we move the camera closer? We have to kind of reorganize some stuff here.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if we move everything closer, you're gonna lose that connection.
Yeah.
If we move the motor closer, we're not gonna be able to talk or do it for like 20 minutes.
Oh.
I would say leave it where it is. Leave it where it is.
All right. Are we good right there?
I think so.
It's in the middle of the frame.
Okay.
I would move that chair.
All right.
Do you need anything to do now?
Well, we're just gonna do light and off like before.
Huh?
You know, nothing different. And then once, start it up, get everything set up, and we'll just hose down the radiator. Should be fairly simple. Good?
Okay. Hose on.
Okay, so everything's on. I think we're pretty much ready to go. We'll make sure. All right, you ready? You ready, Tony?
Born ready, baby. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think this was on.
No, you're not plugged in, right?
Huh?
You're not plugged in.
I'm pretty sure it is. Oh, no, I did take it off with the cap, didn't I?
Yeah.
Man, you had me on. Got me discombobulated. Here we are, ready to fire and can't fire. What in the world? Come on, BGI.
Technical difficulties.
I'm just trying to. No.
You want to check for a spark before you?
I was gonna crank it over and see what happened. Cause it just sounded like the ignition shut off.
Yeah, something. I would before you turn the lighter again. I would make sure you got 12 volts.
All right, Tom, now I'll go to camera and explain, like.
I'll go over here. So I don't know what just happened. It sounded like ignition. Actually, you know, it made a little bit of a pop just as it shut off. Now, if he can get this engine to start again, like immediately, it won't be a problem. But if he's got to go through any sort of, you know, issues to get it started, that could be a problem. So what I suggest is that we find, I would, you know what I would do, man?
Huh.
I would pop the cap off, right? And make sure that thing's gonna throw a spark.
Is it running through?
No, it's starting to wear into it though. We need to move that around.
All right.
You got 12 volts to the,
Yeah, actually, when I disconnected the wire, it sparked.
okay.
So, let me get my meter real quick. I'll take it. Yeah, we just wanted to light
I'll
off.
glasses so I can read comments.
Huh?
Let me get my glasses so I can read comments. Drop the valve? I hope not. Another boat anchor. Oh man, Darren, don't be so harsh. Desert Ranch Girl says it's not the ignition. Yeah, it's a good possibility. Timing chain, hook up the camera to the floor, ground wire. This ain't good. I know, Dan. Hang on, we're working on it. Don't read them? Why not? Somebody's got to read them. Tony has bad luck with these. Not bad luck with what? I haven't touched it.
With Buick 455. That's your first one, Tony.
Oh no, we're gonna lose the shop. Yeah, that's the typical drama.
We can't get this fired up. We're all on the job.
Move the camera closer. If I move the camera any closer, there's a good chance we lose this connection. So I would rather just. Roach clip fell off ignition. He's checking that now to make sure that there's juice there.
Weird.
I heard something pop up.
It sounded like it sped up a wee bit before it shut off. If that's the case, it might have run out of fuel because when the engine runs out, when the engine goes lean, the RPM will come up. Does it have gas?
Yeah, it had almost again. I thought. Oh,
It sounds
no, it's out.
low, but
Could that be it?
Yeah, that could be it. I thought we had plenty.
look, I could see it.
Oh, there's plenty in there.
We got a quarter of a tank, half tank.
Half tank. All right. Well,
Well, is there fuel in the bowl? Can you see the accelerator pump?
yeah, you can see it when I came over here to check to see if it had fuel. You can see it squirt down in there. Yeah, it squirts in there.
Well, give it a spin. Let's see what it does then.
Well, let me hook the coil back up.
It was oil pressure. There was 60 pounds of oil pressure when I looked. John, it had 60 pounds when I saw it. You hope it's not hydraulic. All right, hang on. Yeah, you got it. All right, that's a problem.
Huh?
That's a problem.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It seems like maybe the ignition is giving out.
Well, that's why I suggested popping the cap off and cycling the rotor to make sure it's going to throw a spark.
Yeah. Well,
because when it died, I heard a pop, but a very faint pop. It was like a stray spark, and then that was it.
Battery dead?
No, we're at, 65%.
No, that's not it. You got, if you got enough juice to crank the motor, you got enough juice to.
Yeah, I must have one nut down there. Can you grab that? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You remember the GM HEI, right? Reliable as sunrise. And when they did fail, what happened? That stupid module always went bad, right?
Yep.
I wonder if we're looking at something like that. Because I'm surprised as anybody that the thing just even up and stopped. Or
Yeah, I'm telling you, the way it cut off.
Yeah.
Was ignition. There's like no question about
you know, I agree.
it. All right, let's see. Keep practicing, you'll get there soon.
That's good.
Michael Bertoni, keeping it real goes wrong. HEI EXE has crashed. Dickie
Okay.
Farley likes this. Dickie Farley's having fun.
We're gonna lose the shot.
Danny Boy, cue Uncle Tony's lecture on the virtues of ignition points. Yes, yes, see, I never have this problem. This problem doesn't exist in my world because I use points.
Well, if you want points, we got points.
Go help them. No, they're doing their thing. These guys know what they're doing. They're not amateurs. Yeah, no, it should be okay. If without cranking it any more than they've already cranked it, if they can discover what the problem is and fix that and resume the break-in at that point, it should be fine. Chris Kaysen says the engine has evidence of ignition fraud. So this is how you break in an engine. Yeah.
This is how you break into mechanics.
The engine is as dead as Jeffrey Epstein.
So it's still alive.
So it's totally fine living in Florida.
Bugs Bunny says sabotage.
Sabotage, huh? All right. Let's see what we got here for spare parts. GM sounds as good as any.
Did this happen on the standing in the car? Yeah, absolutely. Where is Gina Haspel? Guys, I haven't had a chance to say Zero. I see you there. I haven't had a chance to say hi to any of our regulars. So, going on, Zero. Who else is here? In 1973. That's why mechanics don't let people watch them work. You know, you're right. You're right about that.
Hey, is this Uncle Tony approved?
I know who Gina Haspel is. I just wonder what she had to do with this.
Hey, so this one's set
Second
outside.
distributor roll pin broke. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that.
Hey, this is distributor set outside. Is this Uncle Tony approved?
Wait a second. See, okay. Did you check the rotor?
Huh?
Did you check the rotor? Is it?
They're all day.
No, but I mean, did the roll pin?
Roll pin. Oh, you mean like did roll pin break in the distributor?
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. But like I said, it sounds like ignition. Like you just went over there and flicked the switch and shut it off.
Well,
And,
but before you go through all of that, right? Okay, this is how I would do this, right?
Uh-huh.
Mark the distributor because mark the distributor housing.
Okay.
Okay, because you get the timing is obviously right. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so mark the distributor housing, loosen the bolt, the hold down bolt, and rotate the distributor and see if it'll throw a spark.
I just pulled the module out because it's all used, right? It's a used module.
Oh, you pulled the module out already?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was like, that sounds like it's a module because these things just run or just die, and it's all used. There you go. I might have some of that actually.
What car is this going into?
Well, a guy I know bought it. It's doing a 6-man Skylight, as far as I know.
Pontiac driveway production says, I don't know, I seen a flame out one side. I thought, it's very possible. I know I heard that sound, right? It was that, you know, it could have very well been a pop out of the exhaust. Dr. Roxo, the stop was too hard for ignition failure out of gas. It was running and then stopped hard. I don't think so. I don't think so. If he just spun it on the starter and it's spinning fine. Why are you deleting comments? Who deleted any comments? Valve trains too tight. No, the engine ran fine. It was an orb. The spirit of the motor has left. Oh, it's possible.
Go with no.
Zero's taking care of business.
I don't know. Do you have any scotch? You got scotch pad or anything?
I have that. Here. One piece of linen cloth. Yeah. Yeah, this kind of stuff happens, right? Is this the drama you were talking about, Tony? When we were working on the Buick?
Well, Mopar Man 78, he blames bad energy trolls.
Bad energy trolls?
It's possible. Call the warranty company. Yeah, yes, Dominic, no, the power wire to the distributor is getting power. Yeah, we checked that. Eugene Bryant, yes, he's going back to basics right now. $70 Chinese eBay HI module. What do you think? Possibly.
Oh, this was a 1985 X1 from Napa. You know what that is? X1? X1? X1?
Well, that's an old one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been there a while. But we're going to go back even older. We got this good old GM one.
Oh, Zero's you and Fubar? Okay. I think it'll light back up. Let's see. Did you check the ECM? There is no ECM. It's an HEI. Unplug it and plug it back in. That's a good one.
Oh, shit, I should have thought of that.
Let's see. Call Scotty Kilmer. He's only up the road. Yeah, we can go get Scotty Kilmer. Mary Ann died today? Oh, Dawn Wells?
From Gilligan's Island?
I guess. Oh, we lost Dale Creasy and Mary Ann at the same time?
fucking 2020 can't be over soon enough.
Oh, no.
It's like,
Oh, no. Mary Ann was like my favorite. She was so beautiful.
she was so girl next door, right?
But you know, the thing is, she had a beautiful personality too, because I seen stuff that she did after that and whatnot. Now, she was a good person. She was 82.
Jeez.
God bless her. She had a nice life.
I didn't know she was. I still remember her as the hot girl on the reruns.
They're working on it, guys. They're working on it.
We're almost done.
Broke the coil wire when there is no coil wire. It's an HEI. I believe the Chinese called them rifters.
Oh, really? A lot of odd ones?
Okay. Closer view to the engine would prevent kids from saying the coil wire is bad. There is no coil wire. It's a HEI.
He's just asking for a closer view, right?
EMP. Yeah, we might have been hit by an EMP blast. Tina Louise is the only one left from Gilligan's Island. Is she really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
There has to be something up there. Or
Danny Boyd, are we sure that this is really an ignition thing? It's got fuel. It's cranking. It sounds like it's got compression. If it was something like where the timing chain snapped or anything like that, it would just freewheel. But it spins like it's got compression. So there's not too many other things it can be. Did the graphite between the rotor button and the cap mess up?
that's what I'm
He's looking at that right now.
Well, we're gonna look and pull the coil out real quick, make sure it didn't burn that contactor in there. Because it just sounds like to me it's an ignition issue. Let's like we come over here and shut the ignition right off. But everyone else is seeing pops and stuff. Right?
When am I going to go fix? No, they got it. They got it. Is it room? No, not if they can resume the break in. At this point, what would have to happen if you can't get it to start again quickly, right? Within just a couple few revolutions, what you'd have to do at this point is pop the valve train apart and recoat the lifters, the lobes and the lifters with a break-in lube. So I think that's what's going to happen now. They're working on the ignition now, changing the module, they're checking the coil, right? If it doesn't light immediately now, what'll happen is we'll end this because he's going to have to pull the motor, not to pull the motor, he's going to have to pull the intake manifold and the rockers and recoat everything. No, the distributor didn't move him. The distributor's tight. It didn't sound, Anthony, it sounded fine. I was sitting here with it. Now is the time to mobilize the camera. If I move this camera, we may lose the feed. So that's why it's the way it is.
I'm gonna go around.
Does anybody know what the actual running time was? How long it was running?
Oh, run, 3 months.
So we're in 3 minutes?
3 minutes, yeah. Okay, you ready to try her out again?
All right, they're gonna give it another shot.
Hook up the battery.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to reprime the oil pump. There's plenty of oil in there.
It's just like if you shut your car off in the driveway, same thing.
Don't lose the shop. you go. So I'm watching the questions. A lot of guys want to know what happened. What was the,
Well, okay, so the GMHI is pretty reliable,
okay.
but the biggest, whenever they fail, they just dead up straight, stop working, right? It's like, no bueno, right? And when it just shut off like that, I assumed it had to be something ignition. And when I checked, there's 12 volts going to the coil seemed to be fine. The button on the rotor was still there. The button on the cap was still there. So I assumed it had to be something with that module.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't gonna be the coil, but it wasn't a hard start.
Right.
You know, it snapped right to it, didn't roll into it. Generally, when the coils go bad, that's the first one you know, roll to life.
Right.
But this thing went snap right through it, so I knew the coil was good.
Yep. Yep.
So it's bad module. So that's what happens. I mean, literally, you know, you never know what's gonna go on. It was a perfectly good module, and then it just took a shit while we're trying to break it again.
Yeah. And luckily, I had another one sitting around, and if you had seen what it looked like before, you probably would have never put it in. But what I found is most of the stuff that's reliable is like the General Motors parts from the 70s. If they've worked before, they probably, if you took it out and it was working, probably is going to work just fine.
Well, I'm sure people have a bunch of questions. What are they?
All right. Let's see.
Well, you're supposed to be here answering them.
Okay.
No questions, mostly just comments.
Most of the comments?
What's the Tang all about? I don't know what that's all about.
I drink Tang,
Oh,
you know.
I was thinking something else.
No, not that Tang.
That's Sailor Life.
Yes.
Is it ready for nitrous? Great job, big guy.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's ready for as much nitrous as you want to throw at it till you hit about, I don't know, 100 shot. So it's just it's a cast piston motor. So,
You know, I swear to God, with my eyes closed, I would know that was a Buick motor.
oh yeah,
Yeah, they have a very unique sound to it.
distinct sound, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard to explain. I can't even describe it. But I was sitting there listening, right? And I'm like, okay, close my, what engine could this possibly be, right? And no, it could only be a Buick.
Yeah, they have their own distinct sound. When you put a cam in them, they really have a distinct
Oh,
sound.
I know.
What was the oil pressure and water temperature?
Well, it stayed at 180 the whole time. It does have a 180 thermostat in it, and then it's because we're cooling it with water from the garden hose. But the oil pressure, once it got up to temperature, dropped to about 50 pounds. So, which is kind of normal. They'll usually run, you know, when you first start them up, 60 pounds.
Oh,
or so.
50 pounds at 2,000 RPM is actually a lot of oil.
That's cool. It's plenty.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys at the Buick, well, the mantra that follows around used to be the guys would jack the oil pressure through the moon, right? Big, high volume, high pressure pump, the whole 9 yards. And really, the big problem is you can shove all that much pressure in there as you want, but the feed is only so big.
Well, that's one of the big problems now, because if and it's with any pump, if you're trying to shove too much through, you'll end up capitating the pump because it wants to feed back.
When it heats the oil, superheats the oil.
And it superheats the oil.
So what I normally do is on the timing cover where the oil pump is housed on the Buick, I port all of the passages in there. They're probably, I'd say, 10% bigger than any of the factory passages.
On the Buick, the oil passages at the timing cover are ridiculous. You have a timing cover you can show them where they
Yeah,
are?
I do. Yeah. So here's a 455 timing cover. And normally this is your pickup. Now this is a 71 model or later timing cover. I don't know if anybody can see that. This is a 71 and later timing cover because the reason why you can tell it's got the big oil feed passage here. The 71 and later were all drilled for 5/8. 70, just the stage 1 was drilled for 5/8. Right?
Well, forget about the size. I mean, show the path that it has to go to.
So it's being sucked from the block in here, and it takes a 180-degree bend, and it goes up into this little dinky passage right here inside the pump. Okay, so it does that 180 turn, comes out the back side of the pump. It's pressurized in the pump, and then it's squished down through that little hole. Well, this hole right here, I've already opened up. And it's normally, I think it's 7/16 is the normal size hole. And if you open that hole up just to the next 2 drill bit sizes up, you'll notice that your oil pressure is much more consistent. Instead of high pressures at startup and then it tapers off and it gets down to about 40 pounds, it'll normally stay around 50 pounds. It'll start up 60, stay around 50 pounds. I kind of stick to the rule of thumb, the old school rule of thumb. I know you can get away with 7 pounds per thousand, but on the Buick, I always just stick to the 10 pounds per 1,000 RPM that the engine's going to run. And then,
you've got that camshaft oiling issue with the Buick. So
right.
I would say that rule of thumb of 10 per doesn't count with these things because of how much you've got to force feed that
the number one cam bearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the big problem with the number one cam bearing, there's 2 things that go on here. If you jack the oil pressure up and you put a high volume, high pressure pump on it, I'll stand back so people can see my face, but if you jack the oil pressure up, all it's doing the distributor is driving the oil pump, and it's run off the very front of the camshaft. And I'll give you a camshaft here real quick.
Here's the thing, right? I know a good portion of our audience are Chrysler people, the Mopar. And the thing is, when you go from like what we're accustomed to, like the size of the pumps, the size of the passages and everything, and then you look at this, it's like, it might as well say Tonka on it. You know what I mean?
No, it's spindly compared to all the other, like, performance application engines. You would think this would not even work. But so on the Buick camshaft, this is the 455 camshaft. This is your distributor gear. It's run off the front of the camshaft. So the rest of it's sitting in the block. And when you jack the oil pressure up really high, this cam is just a cast iron core. Okay, and you can't look at it right now until it's flexing, but it probably is flexing a little bit, just me holding it in the center.
It's a skinny diameter. Even the drive, this is only about 2/3 the size of, let's say, the Chrysler. It's 2/3 diameter, and it's only 2/3 the width, the thickness. So that's
small.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a fragile piece compared to what.
Well, when you jack the oil pressure way up, what it does is it binds this gear up against the gear on the distributor. And it's going to turn it because the engine's running and it's got plenty of torque to pull that Dynaflow, right? But in reality, what happens is it presses down on the nose of this cam because there's nothing supporting it right here. Okay.
Well, you should bring it up close, because you got to see like the relationship between this cam gear and the fuel pump eccentric. Look at this. Look at the way this is. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So here's the fuel pump eccentric, right? And then look at the way this is offset like this. It's like how that works at all, I don't know. But it does.
And the big problem with the high oil pressure on them, when they put so much pressure on the front of this cam, it forces down the front of the cam, which pretty much does a burnout on your number one cam bearing, right here.
Which is fully grooved on
the cam.
Yeah.
The bearing itself is not. So it's an oxymoron. You got to try to balance the oil pressure with the volume so that you have a good running motor, but yet it still has plenty of flow. Right. It's a difficult thing, and that's why Buicks are very. If you find the Chevrolet guys and they do you a Buick motor, it's not going to run like a Buick motor that you had done by somebody that does.
Yeah,
Buick.
They're very unique pieces. So listen, I think we're running over 2 hours, way over 2 hours now, right?
Yeah, that was a long tech session.
That was.
Yeah.
But it was a good one.
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody learned something. Hopefully, I did.
We had our drama.
Yeah.
We're gonna lose the show.
Oh man, and we almost did.
I'm sure the trolls got a blast out of that. These guys don't know what they're doing.
No clue.
Hold on. Third question here. What paint color is original for the Buick 455?
Oh, it used to be called Buick Red. I'm not gonna lie. There's about 20 different cans you buy, and all 20 of them would be a different color. My dad taught me when I was a young buck that to use international red paint, okay, because it's a dead ringer for the Buick. What I do is I'll usually base coat it with like a red from the parts store that's like an engine Duplicolor, red, and then I'll just two coats of international red right on top of the Duplicolor engine paint, so it stays pretty good.
So we're going to wrap this up. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. if you want to see us do this again next Wednesday, throw some suggestions in the comments. I'm going to leave it to you to engineer. You take over, okay? Go through the comments.
Okay.
See who has any good ideas of things that we can do for next Wednesday's show.
Yeah.
Remember that we have, because we really have everything at our disposal here, the carburetor stuff and solar head stuff, anything you guys can dream up, we can probably cover here. So,
Yeah, well, I guess, what is it, till tomorrow? Or see you tomorrow?
I'm going to see them tomorrow. You won't see them until next Wednesday.
Yeah, I'll see you next Wednesday.
So that's it, guys. We're going to tune out. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, mods. And that's it. I'll see you tomorrow. You will see.
See you Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you call me up.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. So was it good? So it was good?